Krakoa's best and brightest are getting ready to strut down the green carpet, boasting the most fabulous fashions the young island nation has to offer. Bold colors match bold attitudes, and powers are proving to be the ultimate accessory. The world is waiting with bated breath as the new team of X-Men nears its unveiling. Plus, another announcement that's being kept secret. For now.
Calling all mutants. Do you ever feel like you don't quite fit in? Are you worried that your incredible powers make you a danger to yourself and others, and the authorities agree? Then why don't you move to Krakoa? Located wherever it wants to be, Krakoa is a living island, one that has graciously agreed to become a new paradise for the world's mutants. Old enemies have come together for the good of all mutants, like Professor Charles Xavier and Magneto. Even Mr. Sinister is a member, and he hasn't even manipulated any of our DNA yet. Well, that we know of. Krakoa is dedicated to being accessible to every single mutant. If you need help getting here, our pirate captain, Kate Pride, and her band of marauders will come and extract you from anywhere in the world. Krakoa, the best place to be a mutant.
Cyclops' human grandparents were U.S. Air Force veteran Philip Summers and his wife, Deborah Summers, who gave birth to Christopher Summers, Scott's dad. He too joined the Air Force and married his wife, Catherine Summers. Together, they had two sons, Scott Summers, later to be known as Cyclops, and younger brother Alex Summers, later to be known as Havoc. After a tragic run-in with the avian aliens, the Shi'ar, the boys escaped, but Catherine died and her gestating third son, Gabriel Summers, aka Vulcan, was taken by the Shi'ar, as was Christopher, who was enslaved. Later, Christopher escaped to become the sassy space pirate Corsair and fell for his future alien life partner, Hepzibah. The boys were raised in the foster system until Scott and later Alex were welcomed by the Xavier School. It was there that Scott first met Jean Grey, who had been placed in the school by her parents John and Elaine with the encouragement of her therapist, Charles Xavier. In addition to their extensive extended family, numerous additional alternate universe and alternate timeline children have been born, or they will be.
Today's story is the Dark Phoenix Saga. Our story begins with the X-Men in space, having space adventures. During the trip back to Earth, Jean Grey is exposed to a solar flare that unleashes her full abilities and makes her one of the most powerful and destructive beings in the universe, the Phoenix. Jean decides to create psychic barriers that bottle up these powers and keep them under control, but the unlimited Phoenix powers catch the attention of an evil group of socialites called the Hellfire Club, and they want the Phoenix to help them take over the world. One of the Hellfire members, a mutant called Mastermind, seduces Jean and brainwashes her into thinking that she's the Wicked Black Queen, a member of the Hellfire Club's inner circle, and a black lingerie enthusiast. As the Black Queen, Jean helps the Hellfire Club capture all of the X-Men. Only Wolverine manages to escape. Wolverine goes on a rampage in the Hellfire Club. He distracts them long enough for Cyclops to have a psychic sword fight with Mastermind. This allows Jean to escape Mastermind's control and fry his brain. But it also causes Jean's psychic barriers to break. Jean Grey goes mad with power and becomes the Dark Phoenix. With her last human act, Jean blows herself up to save her friends. To quote The Watcher, Jean Grey could have lived to become a god, but it was more important to her that she die a human.
This frohawk is everything.
With a royal wave, yes. Oh my goodness, these contacts. That I wasn't prepared for that. Okay, wasn't prepared for.
She's ready to go into battle.
That was awesome. Said pose number 1. Pose number 2. Yeah, and pose number 3.
On September 28th, 2005, Scarlet Witch utters 3 words that rocked the Marvel Universe: "No more mutants," in House of M number 7. Written by Brian Michael Bendis with art by Olivier Coipel, House of M follows Wanda's descent into madness as she tries to cope with the tragedies that have befallen her, causing her to change reality as we know it. In this penultimate issue, a coalition of X-Men and Avengers head to Genosha to find Wanda, battle Magneto, and restore true reality. As the conflict rages, the involvement of Scarlet Witch's family, Quicksilver and Magneto, is revealed. Wanda, enraged and unhinged, unleashes the full fury of her chaos magic and utters the fatal words, "No more mutants," as the world around her disappears in a flash of white.
I can specifically relate to Storm because that character shaped a lot of how I am today. She's very strong, totally confident, and it's like, that is what I want to be like. It made it a little less scary to be different. I made her 90s costume for the first time in 2011 at Dragon Con. It was a little rough, but I started putting together like a list of costumes that I wanted to redo and revisit, and obviously this one was on the top of the list. It feels good to see more representation. Now there's so much more out there for people to come together with and just be who they want to be. If you love that character, you love that character. You want to make that costume, you make that costume.
On June 25th, 1991, Mutantdom's most militant and combative hero squad sets out on their first mission in the eponymous X-Force No. 1, written by Fabian Nicieza and Rob Liefeld, with art by Rob Liefeld. Led by the time-traveling warrior Cable, X-Force infiltrates a mutant liberation front base in Antarctica, determined to defeat the terrorists' strength, but the MLF escapes when they're teleported away. S.H.I.E.L.D. discovers the base's ruins and determines that X-Force is a threat. Nick Fury's called in and authorizes the use of a new Weapon X to track down the anti-heroes.
My mom would house sit. They were getting rid of a bunch of stuff, and the owner was like, "Oh, if you like any of those things, you can keep it." And it was like a stack of comic books, Spider-Man and X-Men, and I was obsessed. When it came to the X-Men, oh, these are people that are just like me. In a way, they kind of became my pals. I love them. They're totally a part of me. I've actually had a lot of interesting experiences with younger people because sometimes they'll try to find someone to connect with, and it's very humbling. I used to feel so alone and so recluse to everything, and now it's I'm a part of this huge community, and it's very special for me. It makes me feel really good.
How sure are you there's going to be a war?
There will always be a war. That's the one thing one can always be sure of. The precise details are the problem. They are elusive. Orcus is ready, but it's not them, it's...
There will always be a war. I could really do without your cynicism right now.
Quiet. I see it. The Eternals. The Eternals will try to kill us all. We must gather the Quiet Council.
On January 24th, 1991, the Weapon X story arc made its debut in Marvel Comics Presents number 72, written and illustrated by Barry Windsor Smith. When secret government project Weapon X, a well-funded, off-the-books organization responsible for enhancing mutations and imprisoning mutants, captures Logan, Wolverine, it's with the goal to fortify his skeleton with unbreakable adamantium and turn him into a mindless killing machine. While the experiment is mostly a success, it also unleashes Wolverine's famous claws, which he uses against those who experimented upon him. Throughout the arc, we're introduced to the program that we'll later learn is responsible for developments of Deadpool.
Best X-Men would be Storm. The wind and the rain. It's fun.
Jubilee's my all-time fave, but I don't know. Captain Britain right now is my favorite.
Cyclops. There is no other answer. Smart, confident, cool under fire, smartest guy on the team.
Captain Cape Pride of the Marauders.
I'm trying not to do a spoiler here. You know what? It's a tie. It's Cannonball or Sunspot.
Storm. She's the toughest by far.
I like Chamber. He's not really is he an X-Man? Would you call him an X-Man? I'm just gonna say him. He is an X-Man now. I think he's gonna be the head X-Man.
Jubilee, but only as a vampire.
Ooh, I'm gonna say Cyclops. I like Cyclops. He's got, I like him. He's good.
Hey, true believers, I'm C.B. Cebulski, editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics and longtime X-Men fan. I am thrilled to be kicking off this celebration of 60. 6-0, can you believe it? 60 uncanny years of everyone's favorite Merry Mutants, the X-Men. Personally, I've been reading X-Men comics for over 40 years. That's over 2/3 of their existence. Blows my mind. Mutant kind has always stood out in the Marvel Universe for being different and for hoping for a better world. Just two of the many reasons why myself and millions of fans worldwide connect so deeply with these characters. Tonight, we're celebrating all things X-Men by talking with some of the greatest creators to ever write and draw the stories. You won't want to miss these exclusive behind-the-scenes insight into the past, the present, and maybe we'll give you a little glimpse, a secret glimpse into the future of mutantdom. But that's not all. We've got giveaways, trivia, and a few more surprises in store. So welcome to X-Men 60 Uncanny Years. Hope you survive the experience.
Misfits, outcasts, mutants. My dream, my vision, is for humans and mutants to coexist in peace and prosperity. But rather than being accepted for who they are, mutants are feared and oppressed. But here, with Cerebro, I can find them and teach them to use their abilities for good. Humankind is evolving, and these are the stories of that evolution. For 60 years, you've read their tales, and tonight, we celebrate them. To me, my X-Men.
Hello, Marvelites, and welcome to X-Men 60 Uncanny Years, an MU special live virtual event. I'm your host, Ryan Panagos, aka Agent M, and you better believe I'm friggin' hyped to celebrate all things X here at the House of Ideas. Of course, we got to give a big welcome to all of you Marvel Unlimited subscribers and Marvel Insiders. They were just telling me that we've got folks here from the UK, Ecuador, Romania, Canada, Uruguay. Thank you all for joining us. It's going to be a special show. So 2023 marks 60 years since the X-Men were first introduced in Marvel Comics. And tonight we'll be celebrating all the incredible characters, iconic storylines, and of course, the important cultural legacy of Marvel's Merry Mutants over the decades. Now, our show tonight is jam-packed with guest appearances from some of the greatest minds behind your favorite X-Men stories, plus some challenging X-Men trivia, and an exclusive Marvel Insider code for 30,000 points, which, you know what, let's fastball special that code up on the screen for you right now. There you go. That's a good one. You're going to want to jot down this code, so after the show, you can go and claim your points. But if you miss it, don't worry. We'll be showing the code again at the end of the show. That's 30,000 points. Nothing to sneeze at. We'll also be taking a special look at some of the incredible Marvel products available this year. Like, how about some of these? We got a whole bunch of stuff from Hasbro, a bunch of great Marvel legends such as Blob. Ooh, I love that one. We're going to talk about that later. Maybe the Villains 5-pack, including one of my all-time faves, Strife. We've got a 3-pack with Forge, Storm, and Jubilee. I love that one so much. We have a 2-pack of great heroes that also somehow includes Gambit. I don't know. We've also got 2 amazing books for you. A stellar X-Men the Animated Series book and the gorgeous X-Men Trading Card book. We'll get into all that later. But am I excited to show them to you? Yes, of course. Am I even more hyped to give these items away later in the show? You bet. But that'll be in a little while. Make sure you stick around for all of that. Look, that's not the only reason you're going to want to stick around. Trust me. These special guests of ours are going to take us behind the scenes of what it was really like creating your favorite X-Men characters and stories. We're going to break it down by eras, and you let us know via the chat which era is your favorite. So let's go through these. First up, we'll cover the X-Men's early years from 1963 through the end of the 80s, the birth of the X-Men. And then we'll dive into the epic comic runs of the 1990s. Oof, love it. After that, we're letting Proteus take the wheel, bending reality and devoting a whole section of the show on the beloved animated series. Yes, I know you hear the theme song in your heads right now. And while we're at it, we might as well just also get some exclusive details about the brand new upcoming Marvel Studios X-Men 97 series. Woof, looking forward to that. But we won't stop there. We'll also relive the all-new era of the 2000s, optic blasting right through the modern Krakoan era and even into the days of future. like I said, we got a lot to cover. And tonight is only the beginning. All year long, Marvel will be celebrating 60 years of X-Men. So make sure you're following us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and keep an eye out for that hashtag XMen60. And remember, this is a live show. They want me to ad-lib something so they know it's live, but I just told you we got people here. Tell me where everybody's coming from. I want to hear it. I've got a machine here telling me all that stuff. So weigh in with your comments, your thoughts, your musings, your hot takes, and your questions. Pop open the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom window and send them our way. Oh, we got Hawaii, Montana, Norway, Spain. Keep it coming, Benjamin. Minnesota. Yeah, we got people everywhere. It's great. We're going to show your questions, your comments on screen. We're going to read them live. It's going to be wonderful. All right. Are we ready? To me, my extra X-Men live stream transition graphics. Who wrote that? In July 1963, Marvel published the X-Men #1. Coming from the creative minds of Marvel legends Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, the book featured a superhero team unlike any other at the time. Young heroes, born different, seen as outcasts, bravely willing to defend the same human population who so often hated and feared them. As new creators and new characters built the mutant mythos, X-Men would become the hottest comic around. I remember being a kid and going to the laundromat with my mom. There was a used bookstore next door. And one Sunday I went inside and came back out with a big stack of dog-eared, beaten up, and deeply loved copies of late 70s, early 80s Uncanny X-Men. It was a lot of stuff. It was a smattering of Dark Phoenix Saga, Proteus Saga, 143, which is the holiday horror issue with Kitty alone in the mansion, one of my all-time favorites. So many great comics. It was just the best. I want to know, what were your early X-Men comics memories? Let us know in the comments. But joining me to talk about these first giant-sized decades of X are some truly legendary Marvel Comics creators. Please welcome Louise Simonson, writer and editor of numerous X titles, including X Factor, New Mutants, Uncanny X-Men, Wolverine, and more. Walter Simonson, writer and artist whose work spans the Marvel Universe, including X Factor and more. And Chris Claremont, X-Men writer since 1975 and currently writing Extreme X-Men. Welcome, everyone. Now, I'm going to ask some questions in a second, but viewers, don't forget, submit your questions for our guests as well. Whew. All right, Chris, we're going to start with you. You, of course, come onto the X-Men with number 94 at the beginning of the all-new, all-different era in 1975 after Giant Size comes out. What were your expectations, your hopes, your perspectives on the X-Men?
That it would last an issue or two?
Just as simple as that? Did you want to create a whole world that you eventually did, or you just wanted to just get it off the ground?
No, I mean, I wanted to work with Dave Cockrum. Len Wein, who had written Giant Size 1, was teamed up with one of the great character designers and storytellers of that and any era. And since when Len gave it up at the end of Giant Size 1, I basically tackled him and said, I want this book. And I wanted it because the characters were great, visually great, they were interesting, and the chance to work with Dave was utterly irresistible.
What was your reaction to the first piece of art you got from Dave?
I want to see the next page. This is great.
That's a good time. Luis, what was your first editorial assignment when you came to Marvel?
My first editorial assignment was any licensed book that Marvel produced. It was, I mean, I also did Man-Thing, which Chris was writing. That was given to me immediately. And I was promised the X-Men, but they needed to finish up the saga they were working on before I was actually allowed to take it, which I got it a little prematurely, and I was so lucky. I loved Chris's stuff. I was so excited to work with Chris.
Aside from working with Chris, what did you know of the X-Men before you joined the X-Men team, as it was?
You know, I had read it off and on. I had not read it religiously because, you know, I was working at another company and producing comics for them, and, you know, you kind of pay attention there instead of to the fun stuff. But honestly, once I was I knew I was getting X-Men. I got these, they had all of the collections of X-Men that they had sort of glued into these volumes. And I brought the volumes home and I started reading them. I lived in Manhattan at the time, and I lived in an apartment, and there was a big party, a loud party going on next door, and I had a headache, and I started reading those books, and it all went away. It was like you just fell into that world. It's a wonderful comic. It was a wonderful comic, and I hoped I didn't mess it up. Being involved.
Four pretty great years on X-Men. I'll be honest, it's good times. We'll keep coming back around, but Walter, I wanted to ask you, had you read any of Stan Lee and Jack Kirby's X-Men when you were younger?
I had. I was actually in college when I discovered Marvel. So this would have been about 1965, at the end of my freshman year. I will say I picked up Thor originally, first one I saw on the newsstand. I read it, and within 3 months, I was buying all the Marvel comics that they produced. Now, back then, that was like 11 titles at about 20 cents a piece. So even a poor college student could afford to buy them all. But I read them, including X-Men. And then that was what, 65. I was in comics professionally by 72 and began working at Marvel in 74, a little after that. And, but I followed a lot of that stuff. I saw the new X-Men when they were reborn by Len and then Chris, and really enjoyed it. So I had kept track of it, and I had some idea of what had gone before. I started a little bit after they'd begun, so it took me a while to backtrack to the really early issues. But the Jack Kirby stuff, I was started after that. But I really loved it. I enjoyed the book, and I enjoyed it even more when Chris was writing it.
Yeah. We've got a comment in here from Brev T, who says, I'm so happy right now. 3 of my favorite creators. These people are my childhood, which I think is it's a beautiful sentiment, and the stories that you all have created have been so important. I want to ask Walter to start, but I'd love to hear from all of you. What makes the X-Men different from other super teams?
A couple thoughts about that. One of them is simply that they're kind of a very specific tribe. I mean, every book has, like, the Fantastic Four as a family. The Avengers seem more like random guys that got together to fight Loki, and other team books were like that. The X-Men had their mutant hood as their unifying factor, and unlike other superheroes, they were feared by most people. I'm not sure why some of the other superheroes weren't feared, but they were not. That was the way books were written back in those days. There was a sense of altruism, and characters behaved properly with powerful ones, other than the bad guys. And you had such powerful bad guys, you had superheroes to take them. There were evil mutants out there, and the mutants began. Professor X brought the team together to fight them. So they were both students, in a sense, learning to be a family. And at the same time, they were isolated from people in general because they were mutants. And that made them, I think, an even tighter knit group. So that gave that and the sense of paranoia that Stan did a pretty decent job of writing in the early first run of the X-Men. That kind of stayed with them for a long time. And it sort of separated them out. Now, I'm not saying that being paranoid was wrong. Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean you're wrong. But they were really tightly bound in a way that other books, in a different way than other books were.
Sure. Chris, obviously, writing the X-Men for so many years, how do you look at the X-Men being a super team, and sort of how are they different from others?
Well, I think spinning off of what Walter said, if you look at pretty much all other superheroes in the Marvel canon, with the exception perhaps of Spider-Man, they all derive from a totally altruistic and accepted, that's the essence of it, accepted platform. People who generally know who the FF are, they trust the FF, they know who the Avengers are, they trust the Avengers. The X-Men, the X-canon, I should say, being a very specific time in a very specific place in history, it not so much. They'd come out and do something, but there'd always be this but at the end. That do we really trust them? They're creepy. Where did they come from? Well, something changed them. We don't know. They got born this way. And I mean, a lot of that came out of my own history as an immigrant. You know, walking into a room and having a different accent, which I did as a kid, dressing differently, approaching things differently. You were very much aware of being an outsider. And that was both scary and there was a feeling of anger in return. It's like, why are you like this? Why do you hate me? Why can't we be friends? Well, you're from somewhere else. Well, it's like, yeah, so, but that was what made it easy. That was the emotional foundation that was easy to translate into the book and evolve over the course of basically getting to know these characters and evolving them over time, giving them depth, giving them an individuality, and turning them as much as I could into people rather than objects.
Yeah. Luis, from the editorial perspective and also a writer perspective, how do you look at the X-Men as a team?
What I loved was the chosen family aspect. The fact that these were all people who were different and chose to be with other people who were the same as they were, only different, who had the same problems, and they chose to interact in such a positive way with each other, to help each other with their difficulties. I mean, that I kind of liked that part of it particularly, which was, it's this wonderful characterization that, we've just talked about these people. These weren't comic book characters, they were people.
Yeah, very much so. Of course, the X-Men fans love an event. They love a crossover. You were all involved in various ways in Mutant Massacre, Fall of the Mutants, Inferno, and I think we readers, the thousands of folks who are watching right now, we often come back to these stories and reread them and reread them. But do the three of you remember any of the conversations or planning sessions for some of these events? Chris, start with you.
Biggest mistake we ever made.
Why is that?
Because it was a success. It was a huge success. And we thought the world would go back to the way it was before. And we would keep writing issues. And maybe a year or two down the line, we'd come up with another brilliant idea and we'd maybe team up or not. And the problem was that the higher authority looked at the numbers, looked at the circumstances and said, all the retailers and all the fans are saying, we want another one. So their reaction was, let's do it again. So we did it again and it sold better. And for me, speaking as the writer at the time, it was incredibly frustrating because you would do this crossover and the crossover would be brilliant. I mean, I'm sorry, encountering the Thor Frog was just wonderful. But you needed 2 or 3 issues to set it up. Then you need 2 or 3 issues to wind it down. And it became harder to do the individual issues that focused on the characters in and of themselves. It focused on a single issue story. I mean, I was taught by Stan, comics were single issue stories because the distribution wasn't good enough that you could guarantee a continued story. 2-part stories, okay, they've got to be good. 3-part stories, only if it's the coming of Galactus, and the end of the 3rd story had to set up the next one, which was great. I mean, if you look at Dark Phoenix, they're all 1 or 2-part stories. The arc is long, but the points of it are very specific and singular. To me, that was the way to do things. And then suddenly we were evolving in a totally different direction, which I totally understand. And it made a lot of sense. And let's face it, the three of us like doing really good stories. It was a great challenge. But again, I'm conflicted because in the process, I think the risk is that of losing that what made the series special in the first place. And that's an ongoing, continuous challenge that, it was fun, but it kind of took over the bus, which again, as a reader, I felt was sad.
Understood. I get your perspective 100%. I freaking love them, and I think everybody does here. We've got love in the chat for Mutant Massacre, from Nikhil and a bunch of other folks. I would love to hear more of the perspectives from Walter and Louise, but we're running out of time, so I do want to get some more fan questions in here. We have Kelly L, who said, and I'll ask this one to you, Louise, if you could take one X-Men character out to dinner to cheers and chat with, who would it be?
Oh, golly Moses. Gee, I don't know. Maybe the Beast would be a really interesting person to talk to. Hank McCoy would be really interesting. Jean would be interesting, depending on what she was going through at any given time. That woman has an interesting life. Cyclops would be kind of interesting, but he's such an introvert that it maybe would be hard to get him to say anything. So I don't know. But
Walter, what about
any
you?
of them would be interesting, actually.
Sure.
Well, I like all those, but maybe Wolverine. He would have some interesting stories.
Chris, you're shaking your head.
Won't beat me to it.
Fair.
Well, we'll take them out together.
That's a good dinner. Giovanni S asks, how do you all feel to be involved with a series, a franchise that has had such a cultural impact on the industry and pop culture in general? That's obviously a very big question, but do you have that perspective to look back and see how the characters that you've all touched in so many various ways, how that's affected folks? Chris, what about you?
I think that's a more appropriate question for the 100th anniversary, the centennial. So I'll give it to you then.
Okay, thank you. What about you, Louise or Walter?
I feel very lucky that we've done. It's really wonderful when you go to a convention and you meet people who say that the stories that you've told have made a difference in their lives. It's very humbling because you're sitting there and you're just making stuff up and you're hoping that people will enjoy it, but you really are very lucky when it touches somebody's heart. And I hear that with the X-Men stories a lot, that it made some people's childhoods bearable, it sounds like. Just being able to sink into the stories.
Yeah. And I would say, comics was a much smaller business back in the day we were doing this stuff. The death of Jean Grey kind of propelled comics into, especially the X-Men, other comics went along with it, into kind of a higher stratosphere, and it began to become a different business. But in the old days, I have to tell you, I was just glad the checks cleared.
Well said. This has been amazing. A huge thank you to Chris Claremont, Louise Simonson, Walter Simonson for joining us. Give a wave to everyone watching, y'all. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. Now, stream, let's head to some Uncanny X-Men trivia.
Access granted.
Access granted. Access granted. Access granted. Access granted. Access granted. Access granted. Access granted. Access granted. Access granted. Access granted. Access granted.
All right, welcome back. Good to see y'all. I'm getting a lot of messages internally saying the chat is popping off. So keep it up. You guys are doing great. They are having a hard time keeping track of all your answers and the trivia. Guys, crushing it. Like a lot of accurate answering, which is awesome. Tons of voting. Glad you all liked Chris and Luis and Walter. But let's get into everything else. A few reminders before we dive into our next panel. As I mentioned at the top of the show, we've got some incredible items to give away. Let's check out another one of them right here. X fans, check it out. It's our boy Fred Dukes, aka the Bodacious Blob. This is the brand new Marvel Legends series Blob figure from our pals at Hasbro. Now, I had the Toy Biz Blob figure from the mid 90s, and as much as I loved that one, this new 6-inch Marvel Legend figure really does justice to one of the X-Men's oldest rivals. We will be giving away 15 of these incredible figures tonight, along with some other really cool stuff, and all you gotta do in order to be eligible to win is stay tuned to the show. We'll be randomly choosing winners at the end of this stream, so stay tuned. But we also have an extra amazing giveaway just for Annual Plus subscribers. You're all receiving an exclusive NFT digital comic of X-Men number 64 from our partner, Vivi. The issue features the first appearance of Shiro Yoshida, aka the Fiery Mutant Sunfire. Love him. It's a classic. Instructions on how to redeem the NFT digital comic on the Vivi app will be sent via email to registered Annual Plus members tomorrow. But in the meantime, everyone, keep on sending us those questions and comments. Click on the Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom window and send them our way. We'll do our best to answer as many as we can, and trust me, you're going to want to come up with some good ones for the guests on our next panel, and that starts right now. So it's 1991, and what do you do with the most popular franchise in comics? Wipe the slate clean and start over. With a fresh X-Men #1, a new direction for flagship Uncanny X-Men, sizzling hot spin-offs, and new heroes and threats, the late 80s and early 90s introduced a new generation of readers to the bombastic, colorful, and wild mutant saga. Myself, I remember being 10 years old and going to the Five and Dime, look it up, kids, and seeing Infinity Gauntlet #6 and X-Men #3 on the rack at the same time. Those two issues, especially X-Men, supercharged my love and interest in comics like nothing else. And we talked a little bit about events and crossovers with Chris, Walter, and Luis earlier. And the beauty of them, especially with X-Men comics and X-Men fans, is everyone has their one big event that hit them at the right time in all the right ways. For me, it's all about 1992's Executioner song, what is commonly referred to by holy people and historians as the greatest story ever told. And you can fact check that. What's your favorite X-Men event, and why is it Executioner song? Let us know in the chat. But this show ain't just me waxing poetic about Cable and Strife and Bishop and Boom Boom's Wired Jaw and ooey gooey Apocalypse. We got new guests to chat with. Joining me to talk about their iconic work from this era are two supremely talented creators, Rob Liefeld, the Dean of Deadpool University, whose iconic art and stories helped usher in a new era for mutants, and Mark Silvestri, whose work at Marvel included 5 years of beloved art on Uncanny X-Men and Wolverine. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to, of course, ask some questions, but viewers, don't forget, submit your questions for our guests as well. So, Rob, hi, how you doing? Right out the gates, when you start at Marvel, you're jumping into X-Books. You got X Factor, Uncanny X-Men, a rager of a Wolverine-focused What If, which I really love, then New Mutants. How hyped were you from even like a fan standpoint to draw mutants and eventually plot their stories as well?
Yeah, Ryan, thank you, and thanks for having me, and great to see you. There was no bigger franchise than X-Men growing up. It was and remains my favorite group of characters, group of stories, and so the opportunity, when given the call to come and work for Marvel and draw X-Men related titles, you can't imagine how thrilled I was, and at the same time how intimidated, because of course, I had to slot an X-Men issue in between the gentleman that I'm on here with, Mark Silvestri. I'm like, oh crap, I have to draw.
You did all right. You did all right.
So it was the X-Men remains, like I said, my favorite Marvel, my favorite superhero concept characters. They still entertain me, and those memories are fantastic.
Yeah. We got a bunch of great comments in here already. Outback era forever. Two of the goats. For me, it all started with Rob's Cable, and everyone always pictures Silvestri's Wolverine in their heads, which, I mean, you ain't wrong there, chat. Mark, you come on to Uncanny X-Men in 1987, but aside from X-Men versus Avengers, that limited series, and a few other issues here and there, you'd mostly done solo titles. But obviously, Uncanny X-Men is a massive book, and you're helping refresh looks, introduce new characters, new villains. Was your game plan for Uncanny X-Men any different from those other titles you'd starred? What was your perspective going into that?
My game plan was just hang on and don't disappoint anybody. That was my game plan. I was in my 20s, and like you said, I just did like single issue stuff, and I did X-Men versus the Avengers, and people may not know this, but that's actually what got me the X-Men gig to work with Chris Claremont. People also may not notice that I actually didn't do the last issue of that 4-issue miniseries because I'm the X-Men, and sometimes I'm not a dummy, and I went, sure, I'll take that gig. But yeah, it was look, I was in my 20s. I was working with the biggest writer in comics on the biggest book in comics. It rarely gets any better than that. And I was just happy to be there and work with Chris. Chris was a great collaborator and very open to my visual interpretation of whatever characters he was going to throw my way. And it was very freeing. I think Chris is very respectful of the artists he's working with. I think that shows in all of his all the work he's done, which we all know spans a lot of years and a lot of artists. And I think he's always had a way, and the X-Men have always had a way of bringing out the best in what we do. And I think, Rob, you can attest to that as well. There's something about those characters and the way that they are written by some of the best writers in comics that just brings out the best in us as artists.
Oh, yeah. Rob, there's a comment that came in. Liefeld's X-Force is the first comic series I ever collected in full, which is great segue into my question, which is, Rob, there's this window here, 1990, 1991, with some of the biggest launches of all time. Spider-Man, X-Men, X-Force. When did you start thinking about taking the New Mutants team and evolving them into X-Force? And also, can you give us a sense of what it felt like as you're writing and you're drawing these characters during this explosive era? Obviously you've gotten a little traction under you, but it still must have been wild.
Look, yeah, again, they're my favorite period of my entire career. That was tremendous growth, tremendous energy, tremendous opportunities. Again, when it came to the New Mutants, they were open to all sorts of new ideas, and they had asked me if I would come up with some new designs, some new characters. The editorial team wanted to have a new leader. I, as a fan of the group, felt like the team was in sore need of something of a fresh voice, because the X-Men really had Xavier and Magneto kind of populating that world, and while they had both kind of gone in and out of the New Mutants book, the New Mutants didn't really have a voice of their own that was connecting, because I was still a fan, man. I'm going every Wednesday and buying these comics. I'm in my 20s, my young 20s. So I jumped at the chance, and look, you know what? I could have put forth characters that people rejected. I was fortunate. I was on the same wavelength as the fans because I was such a fan. They totally dug everything that was going on with Cable. And because of the success of Cable and the response to Cable, they just kept, they being Marvel editorial, just entrusted me with the future of the franchise. And we started discussions, I'd say 5 issues in, because I really honestly, what all these guys had that I was terribly jealous of was an X in their title. Okay. X-Men, X Factor, even Excalibur worked an X in there, right? I mean, so I'm like, can I not be, and Wolverine doesn't need an X. He rises above all of it. Okay. So it goes without saying, but I just really felt, I mean, in all honesty, I wanted an X in the title. And so we knocked around those names and we settled on X-Force. And like you said, we were able to wedge in there and catch right away. I mean, Ryan, every month I would go do store signings during that period and get the feedback straight from the fans, and the crowds were getting bigger and bigger. Mark and I did a shared appearance during that time, and I pulled up and Southern California, just mobs of people outside, because again, the X books were just what were rocking the comics world. They were just the epicenter of all the excitement.
Mm-hmm.
I like how you say you wedged in there. It's like the biggest damn wedge of a #1 issue in the world, Rob. Sorry, I want to keep pulling in some stuff from the fans in here. John A says Strife is one of my all-time favorite villains, period. Amen to that, John.
Thank you.
And then we got one in here that says Silvestri's Wolverine covers got me buying at 7 years old, begging mom, which that is a great one because that segues into what I wanted to talk about, Mark. Of course, in addition to Uncanny X-Men run, you got over 20 issues on Wolverine with writer Larry Hama. And for me, that was my Wolverine Bible. I remember losing my freaking mind trying to get and then finally getting number 41 with Wolverine, Cable, Sabretooth, and the Sewers. That was my jam. And at number 50, I read over and over again. I damn near wore out that die-cut cover. What brought you from Uncanny X-Men? You talked about how big that was.
Right.
What brought you from that to Wolverine?
Well, it's the timing was really perfect because I'd worked on, like you said, the X-Men for like 4 years, and a team book can be a real grind. And even though Wolverine is X-Men, it was a single character, and it had a new voice with Larry Hama, who I had never worked with as a writer. He was my editor when I first started with Marvel. He was my editor on Conan the King, which was, if anyone knows Larry, that's this experience to be edited by him. But working with him as a writer and an artist was fantastic. And I loved how he put Wolverine in the real world, grounded. It wasn't so much Wolverine as it was Logan. You know, if it weren't for the fact that Wolverine, the title was such a seller, the book should have been called Logan, because that's what it was, you know, and it was just a lot of fun, you know, and my time on the X-Men had ended. You know, Jim was coming in like a storm, and it's like, okay, this is perfect for me and perfect for the fans. They get someone fresh in there, and I get to do something new, and it was just it all worked out perfectly. And I have just as many fond memories working with Larry on Wolverine and some of those amazing stories as I did with Chris on X-Men and those amazing stories. So I was blessed during those years of my career. Still some of my favorite memories in comics.
I love to hear it. Of course, a reminder to all you watching, send us those questions for Rob and Mark via the Q&A section from the bottom of your screen. But I don't think we have any worries here. We got more coming in. This one is a fun question for the two of you. What is your favorite moment, page, or even single panel in X-Men history? Could be something that you worked on or something that you just blasted your face off because you're a fan. Rob, I mean, you've been talking about how much of a fan you are. Do you have one thing that you close your eyes, you could just picture it?
So yeah, I would mortgage everything I had to buy the cover to X-Men 141 Days of Future Past. I'm friends with a bunch of avid art collectors, and we were out just a month ago. And the funny thing is, Ryan, they're all Marvel pieces. Mine happened to be an X-Men piece. They're like, well, this page of Spider-Man, like, what would you do to get? And I'm like, man, X-Men, I'm telling you, I can tell you, I had to walk past the counter. It was called U-Totem. It was kind of a 7-Eleven type marketplace. And, you didn't know it was coming each and every month when X-Men was shipping. And I turned, and there is a Wolverine with silver in his hair with a leather jacket protecting Kitty Pryde, right? Who's older. And you got that infamous poster. And I mean, literally, I was shaking and I was stumbling the 3-block walk home because I wouldn't take my eyes off the comic. And to this day, I mean, that image, that storyline, and it's just so incredible. They did it in 2 issues. What Claremont and Byrne and Austin did with that storyline was done roughly within 40 pages. And it is my favorite X-Men Marvel comic book story of all time. So there, I'll let Mark go.
Before you go, Mark, I was doing a bunch of research on that book too, and thinking about how much work Chris and John were also doing at the time, and how tight it is, how good it is. It's so good. Sorry, Mark, please.
It's brilliant.
No, look, it's hard to top that. I have a single image, which first of all, Walt Simonson was one of my early and favorite influences. And every time, Rob and I were talking about this earlier, every time I try to incorporate any Walt Simonson in my work, I failed miserably. Because only Walt Simonson can be Walt Simonson, right? But he did this cover when Master Mold had a hold of Cyclops, and Cyclops is zapping him with his lasers. And I went, oh, that is so Walt, and it's so beautiful. And I just remember that cover so well as like just affecting me. He goes, oh man, how do I rip off? How do I homage Walt Simonson a little bit more in my work? Yeah, but you can't do it. So, but yeah, that was one of those images that just kind of burned in my head. Just a huge Walt Simonson fan anyway.
How can you not be? Earlier, we were talking about events, crossovers, and you've both been right in the thick of those stories with epics such as Inferno or Extinction Agenda, among others. What's your perspective on, whether it's drawing crossover issue, being in the meetings, talking about them, because you've got lots of extra characters. There's, I would imagine, lots of extra cooks in the kitchen because you're mixing a whole bunch of stuff. Is it fun? Is it stressful? Is it just like, this is another day, we're doing the work, we got to get it done? Mark, we'll start with you.
Yeah, those crossovers were not just another day, right? They were an honor to be part of, quite frankly. And it was just a lot of fun. Inferno for me was one of my favorites, and again, because you had these other books involved and other talents involved, it was just great to see what other people were doing with all the same characters. What Chris had written was just so crazy anyway, that all the rules were basically off. So I could have just fun creating things that normally you just wouldn't do. Mailboxes eating people, elevators eating people. It's like, you don't get to do that in comics, especially back then. Now you can do whatever you want, but back then it was like pretty stringent as far as like, this was a superhero comic, you're doing superheroes. So Inferno was really kind of liberating, right? And you got to do these kind of out there versions of all of everyone's favorite heroes. The evil dark version of Wolverine, the evil dark version of Havoc. It was a wonderful experience, and I sign a lot of those at conventions, obviously. And every time I see a copy of Inferno, it's like I get this little smile on my face. That was my personal favorite as far as the event crossovers and such. Inferno, I'd have to say that. I loved it all, but Inferno kind of this much higher above the others experience-wise.
Rules. That's great. Rob, what about you?
I just want to join in the chorus and say Inferno. I said this to Mark before coming on. It is, to me, the best of the coordinated events Marvel ever did. And there's a generous amount, and they're all spectacular. Inferno, because Mark and Walt were just firing on all cylinders. That storyline, and it was just a hell of a storyline too. Look, you know what, Ryan? The only storyline I ever participated in, and I could only do it kind of from a distance because they were granting me the opportunity to start writing the stories right after, and I couldn't get bogged down. And I really feel like Extinction Agenda was, and I've always said this, I talk about this on my podcast, in all honesty, it was an X-Men vehicle. It was really more about the events that were happening in the X-Men. It's my favorite work Jim Lee ever did on the X-Men is his chapters. But I had to tap out early on, just do what's called breakdowns, because I was preparing to, I wanted to put all my effort into the last 3 issues of the New Mutants, which would be 98, 99, 100. And Ryan, at the time, I didn't think those books would be collected as their own kind of chapter. But as the years go by and Marvel has collected 98, 99, 100 as their own like trade paperback, and you go like, I just had, because it was such a big pressure. Sometimes you be careful what you wish for. I'm going to now start writing the stories for these books. And so I pivoted my direction towards that. But like I said, the Extinction Agenda stuff with Jim, I thought was the strongest. It's my favorite work. It was really exciting. It gave you, just like with what Mark was doing in Inferno, it gave you all the standoffs you wanted. Wolverine versus Archangel. Again, I'm a fan. I can remember going to the store and getting it and going, oh my gosh, look what Jim is drawing, right? And so look, then afterwards, I feel like you mentioned Executioner Song. That was the cultivation of so much that I had worked really hard to set up. So it was great watching it come together. And again, what Marvel does great is they made it so much bigger and more chapters. And I'm with you, Ryan. That's one of my tops. I'd say after Inferno, that was a pinnacle, I think, for the X-Men, because you just never stop being a fan, right? I mean, you're just, I'm with those characters. I'm a ride or die for the rest of my life. And before I get closed off, I got to show this. I brought my signed X-Men #1. I got this about 8 years ago, and I said, Stan, you got to sign this. And he signed it, and I got into CGC, and I'm fortunate to get a 5 because this thing is beat. It is beat. But come on, people, it's the 60th anniversary of the X-Men.
The fact that it's a 5 is even better. That is a red comic book. I love that. Yeah, I love that.
So I just, before I get played off, the music comes and gets me like I just had to show my X-Men love with my
That's cool.
X-Men signed by Stan the Man. So there you go. Sorry, Ryan.
That's
I that in.
I love it.
That's awesome.
That's fantastic. We've got a ton of stuff coming in here. I'm looking at the chat that I'm getting. They love the cover. Lots of wows. Someone said Liefeld is a real one. Love the passion in the Zoom. This event is making me so happy. Why are these guys even cooler than I imagined? And Rob, I've known you a long time. I love talking to you. Mark, it is a pleasure having the chance to talk to you here.
Oh, happy to be here.
Yeah, there's one in here from Connor G who says, Mark, your work on Uncanny is my personal favorite. I especially admire the way you brought contemporary 80s fashion in the book, which made it feel so edgy and fun. Do you have a fashion background?
Well, clearly the way that I'm dressed. I do. No, it's that was one of the fun things about comics, is being able to bring in different skill sets that people maybe don't recognize. Like I was never in the fashion business, but I always appreciate good design. And I always thought the best of fashion incorporated really good design. And the best in superhero comics and superhero characters, they all have elements of design that just work, and they become evergreen, right? And every version of that character over the decades, literally, is a version of whatever the look was that worked the best from way back in the day. And so it was just fun. I mean, Rob, you probably, obviously, you created so many characters that a huge part of the fun is you get on the drawing table, you just start sketching ideas, right? It's the process of elimination. Sometimes it happens immediately. It's like, boom, there it is. Sometimes like, oh, that sucks, erase that. That sucks, erase that. Ooh, I like that little piece of that one character is about, that much of the shoulder, and suddenly your design starts to grow from that, and you get that design language in your head, and it all comes together. And that's just like, we're all blessed in this business as creators that we can do that, and as comic book people, we wear all the hats. We're the set designers, we're the production designers, we're the directors as we tell the story. We get, where else do you get to do that, right? And nobody can really tell us no, because no one's putting tens of millions of dollars behind us like you do in a feature film. It costs a few bucks to make a comic book, right? So we could kind of do what we wanted to, and still to this day that holds true. And I tell people all the time, because I've dipped my toes in all kinds of media, so has Rob. And Rob, see if you agree with me on this, but compared to all other media, I don't care what it is, television, film, video gaming, the most direct, the most unfiltered, clear path to your voice as a creator and getting your idea out there is comic books.
Amen. Yes,
right?
sir.
That is comic books. It all starts there and then can go wherever it wants to. But if you are a creator out there and you want to get your idea completely unfiltered, bing, go to comic books.
Amen.
Amen to that.
That is like amen. The amen, as well as the X-Men.
That's amen. There you go. New idea. Copyright. There
Look,
you go.
I love this chat. I love talking to you too. It's been astonishing, but we got to wrap this one up. A huge thank you to Rob Liefeld and Mark Silvestri for joining us.
Thank you.
Just
Thank you.
wonderful, you guys. Thank you so much. All right, it is time for some more trivia here on the stream.
Access granted. Access granted. granted. Access granted. Access granted. Access granted. Access granted.
My favorite X-Man is probably Magic. Why do I like her? First of all, she has a big giant sword, which is great.
My favorite X-Men character is Emma Frost because she is nothing less than fabulous.
Happy anniversary, X-Men. My favorite mutant's gotta be Forget-Me-Not, because he has this hilarious power to be forgotten if you... Wait, who was I talking about? Why am I recording?
That cover for issue 141 of Uncanny X-Men was just so wild to me, seeing all the slain X-Men in the background with the older Wolverine. Like, I needed to know what was going on.
Nightcrawler is hands down my favorite X-Man. I think he's got one of the coolest power sets and character designs in X-Men history.
My favorite X-Men character is Logan, Wolverine. He's got the most interesting, intricate backstory from his century plus of living. If that's not enough, he's got the coolest leather jacket and the claws.
I have started learning how to draw digitally a year ago, and the only X-Men that I have drawn so far is Magic. Please check it out.
My most strongly held unpopular opinion about X-Men is that the character Forge, in fact, has the best casual look of all the X-Men. I, for one, believe that the striped shirt with the popped collar, gym shorts, and the cybernetic leg is a look we should all aspire to.
Mitch, I don't know what you're saying. That is not an unpopular opinion. Forge is fashion goodness. I love Forge. I love that you had that pick in there. We are back to the many thousands of you watching. Hello, hi, you're doing great. Keep sending those questions and stuff. But before we dive into some animated goodness, that's our next era to talk about, a few quick reminders. Giveaways, we got more. Let's give them a little look-see right here. Woo! I'm gonna go full stone cold right now, and it is 316, so give me a hell yeah! And so bask in the glory of this X-Men Villains Marvel Legends 5-pack from Hasbro. Stab your eyes, it is the good stuff. Random, Pretty Boy, Vertigo, Zero, and of course, Sweet and Salty Strife. We've got 15 of these sets to give away, and surely one for me. Yes, maybe. We'll see. So stay tuned until the end of the show to be eligible to be chosen at random to win one of these sets. All right, we're ready to press play on our next panel. So grab that popcorn and get ready to fire off those questions in the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. Here we go. Premiering in October 1992, X-Men the Animated Series quickly became another important gateway into the world of mutantdom. From its iconic opening and music, again, if it's not playing in your head right now, please see me after the stream. To its diverse roster of heroes and nuanced storylines, the series became a beloved favorite for many generations of X-Men fans, myself included. So much so that Marvel Studios is bringing back animated X-Men action with the highly anticipated series Marvel Studios X-Men 97 coming soon to Disney+. Once again, we can ask the eternal question, does a mall babe eat chili fries? Joining me to talk about all things 90s animated X-Men are Eric Lewald, the X-Men the Animated Series showrunner, Julia Lewald, the X-Men the Animated Series writer and co-author with Eric of X-Men, the art and making of the animated series, Larry Houston, X-Men the Animated Series director, and Bo DeMeo, writer and executive producer of Marvel Studios X-Men 97. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to ask some questions, but viewers, don't forget to submit your questions for our guests as well. We're going to start with Eric and Julia because 30 or so years ago, when you first got that call about doing an X-Men series, could you have imagined we'd not only still be talking about this series, but gearing up for its continuation?
Not in a million years. It was, oh boy, we've got work this year. Had no clue that it was going to be a big deal. And we had a baby and another one on the way. So that was good timing as far as, paying the bills went. But besides that, we did not know what we were getting into. No clue.
Julia, I feel like you've done such a great job carrying the torch and keeping the hype going on social media. And Calvin, we've talked about this, you and I and Eric. And
Ryan, thank
you. It's been so great, and with the books and everything, it's got to feel real cool.
Well, for a few years there after the show wrapped, it's kind of like shouting in the wilderness. Anyone remember it? Because way back when there was no social media and it was not easy to sort of find people or meet people who were fans of the show back then. And now with the advent of the availability of being able to do Twitter or Facebook or all these, my God, it's been such a wonderful opportunity to connect with folks who are fans of the show, who are fans of the X-Men. And that we had some part in that is just remarkable.
Larry, you go back even further. You're working on Pride of the X-Men, which is the precursor to the animated series. What are your memories of both that initial effort and the series which you produced and directed?
My memories of that show was that when we were given the green light to do the Pride of the X-Men, it was like a kid in the candy store getting the green light to put together what I knew was going to be a successful show. Myself, Will Mineo, and Rick Holberg, we put this thing together because we're all fanboys who were also directors working in the animation studio. And it was like the best thing that we could ever have hoped for. And we got the best animation. We got Toy Animation to do the great work for us, and we got really good voice actors. The only problem we had was that the zeitgeist was wrong. I mean, CBS, NBC, ABC just didn't understand what's a mutant. What is this? How come they don't like each other? It was just the wrong time to do it. We had to wait another 6 years to put the real series on, the series that you guys saw. So that's my memories of Pride of the X-Men. And we did our best, but wrong time.
Sure, but then of course you've got 5 years of amazing X-Men the Animated Series. Do you have any specific memories about the early times coming together for the series?
I want to jump in that. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just going to jump in that Fox Kids was a brand new network back then, and it's hard to realize, but ABC, CBS, NBC were the three big players in Kids Saturday Morning. Fox and Fox Kids were brand new players, and they were willing to take some chances and willing to try some properties that the other networks had passed on.
And the lady that made it happen, Margaret Lesh, was just made president of this little company, and she took the biggest risk on the planet and hired all of us.
Yeah, and she was also the person that when I was working at Marvel Productions, she's the one who found the funding to do the pilot for Pride of the X-Men, and she was like essential for making everything happen, and she believed in the show so much that when she became the CEO of Fox Kids, she's the one who called me and Eric and Will and Rick and others and saying, hey, we're going to do the X-Men for Fox Kids. She's the one to put it on the air, and to me she will always be the secret superhero of Saturday morning, because without her nothing would have happened.
Having read both the books about the making of the series, I've heard her name and seen all the effusive praise about her. So love to hear it. Bo DeMaio, you are heading up X-Men 97, but how important to you are the X-Men and that original animated series?
The standard answer is always going to be like very important, but it really, really was. I think when I first met Eric, Larry, and Julia, it was very emotional, and I was like, literally, your show saved my life. And it was. I think it is for a lot of people. I grew up in Florida, very small, kind of, small town, and like no one looked like me. I was like this mixed race kid, black, white, then was like, oh shoot, I'm gay too. And it was just like, wait, no one around me resembles me. And then here's this show that I'm tuning in as like a 10-year-old, and I'm like, oh, I get it. Oh, they get it. Oh, they're struggling with identity too. And it was really giving me those building blocks to really start to understand how do you kind of create an identity in a vacuum. And then, as I was getting older, I was reading comics. Then I saw the first X-Men movie. And I remember I went to a bookstore, a very small bookstore when we had bookstores. And I was like, I'm going to write a sequel to the first X-Men movies. It's going to be my first script. And I read the book because my family was not super, super, super wealthy. So I was the guy who would read the comic books. Screenwriting for Dummies, learned how to write a script, wrote a horribly formatted, no one will ever see it, sequel to the first movie, and like discovered my love of screenwriting in general. And it just kind of went from there, and was always reading the comics. And now somehow, honestly, every day I'm like, how the heck am I here?
Well, it's funny that you say that, because I want to ask you, Bo, how in the name of Lilandra Naramani did X-Men 97 actually start to become a reality at Marvel Studios?
That is a good question. It started in COVID, around September of COVID. I just wrapped up Moon Knight, working on Moon Knight for Marvel Studios, and got a call that Brad Brunnerbaum, who is the head of streaming, wanted to kind of just chat. And I was like, okay, cool, like nervous, but cool. And we got on this thing, we were talking about projects. He's like, would you ever be interested in maybe pitching a show? Well, let me just show you a picture. And he shows me a picture of, the X-Men animated series. And comes back, and I'm like, okay, well, I should be professional and try to play this cool. So I was like, yeah, I'd be really interested in thinking about that. Yeah, let's think. And then promptly got off the phone, screamed, cried, ran around, and then just went, came up with a pitched it to Kevin Feige, and him and Brad could not have been more just supportive, and also just encouraging to make sure that we got it right. I think one of my favorite parts was like they were truly interested in like what my experience as a Black gay man was, and how it was going to inform the story we were telling, and that to them was like, that is how we're going to make this authentic. Because really what you're talking about with X-Men is like all of us, like I don't care what your religion, your nationality, your sex, your gender, you walked into a room full of people and you've gone, oh my gosh, there is no one in here like me. And I think that is ultimately what X-Men is trying to get at. And so then I went into the desert for about 2 weeks, came up with the entire first season, and then came back, and we got Eric, Julia, and Larry to come aboard and be like, am I screwing this up? And they have been like such amazing, like just creative partners, and just parents, I call them, and just moral and creative support. And then we've just assembled a great team of just really amazing directors and artists and storyboard artists and writers to just, get this right and really drill down to what I think the X-Men is always going to be about, which is just, we talk a lot about, the dream is social acceptance, and it's social justice, and it is, but I think that can sometimes make certain people feel alienated. And like for me, it's always going to come down to, I think, what the X-Men and what we're going to be trying to do with this series is talking about the power of empathy, and how it can kind of heal these wounds that turn people against each other. Mm-hmm. That things like racism and bigotry don't just exist. There's a reason behind it, that empathy can kind of help us connect and build those bridges where we can actually say, hey, we are all different, but we have these little things that can still connect us. And it's been an incredible journey, and I will always just go back to Larry, Eric, and Julia just being these kind of pioneers who told a story that we take it for granted, looking at how diverse media has become, the voices that are out there right now. But like, I will say, with no exaggeration, these are the people who made us feel like, hey, we should keep going. And we should try, and we should be ourselves, and we should advocate for ourselves. And like, their cartoon is that kind of lesson of how to contain your rage when you're angry and you feel misunderstood, but how to fight, how to find love, all of that. Like, it starts with them. And so I will always just be, I mean, I see them all the time, so it's not like I'm just saying this is the first time I say this at dinner. When we have dinner, I'm just like, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I think the show is a love letter to what they did, but it's also a love letter to you guys, to you three.
Oh, jeez. Okay.
Bo, if the whole screenwriting thing doesn't work out, you got a whole career in writing motivational speeches and like rah, like just, I want to flip a table right now. And the chat is popping off. So I gotta read some of these. Can't wait to watch this show. I need to see this show like right now. My younger brother and I are looking forward to this revival. Cannot wait. There's a couple in here that were really great. I was the only Latina kid in an all-white school in Indiana when this show came out, and it was so meaningful for me. I think that so many folks can connect with that. Now, there's a great question in here.
If I can actually respond to that, like, that is like the key point of X-Men right there. Like, my parents are white. I was adopted as an orphan. And I think that right there, that power of resemblance, and I think so many people grow up not having it and mistaking the physical for a resemblance and connection. And so, like, I get you, and that's what we're going to be talking to.
Yeah. Larry, Eric, and Julia, a question comes in from Pep ZR, who says, "Thank you for making my childhood awesome by making the cartoon. Was there any Marvel characters that you wanted featured in the X-Men cartoon that didn't make it?"
Larry?
Oh, Larry, you're
Larry, be careful. Larry, be very careful here.
Give it.
Oh God, there was one character.
Oh no!
I tried to put in, but it got deep sixed, and I think it was Spider-Man. I tried to put Spider-Man in, but the contracts weren't written correctly, so that got taken out. If you write the contracts before the character comes in, everything's fine because I think the X-Men crossed over in Spider-Man. But, I tried to do it without the contract, so that didn't make it.
I would also jump in that one of the challenges, one of the extremely fun and gratifying parts of X-Men, but a challenge was you had a team of 8 players plus Professor Xavier to work with already, and trying as a writer to service the characters and make sure that the ones who were already there got to tell their stories, that we got to explore. That provided a challenge in terms of, well, who else would you like to throw into the mix?
No, we just were sweating to service the ones we had, and plus guest stars, plus old lovers, plus brothers and sisters they didn't know they had, plus missing fathers. So all these people were part of this huge X-Men universe. And Julia's right. In a 22-minute story, if you try to give everybody 5 seconds, I mean, it just. We were more worried about serving the people we had, and just didn't have the emotional and literary space to fit in, to imagine ones we'd love to have.
Yeah,
sure. Let me flip that then, and because one of the many things that fans such as myself so deeply love about the series is how many incredible characters and cameos we actually did get to see in those 5 seasons. It's friggin' jam-packed. The main cast, the smaller cameo appearances, a quick around the horn. I would love to know, do you have any favorites of either the main cast or a cameo? Bo, what about you? As a fan, do you have just like the favorites that pop off right off your head?
See, this has been my learning curve of like, I will say like, hey, Scarlet Witch is a mutant in the original series. And then people are like, oh, she's in the show. And it's like, as a fan, I have to watch kind of like how I express my fandom now. But what I would actually say is, everybody knows I'm a massive Jean Grey fan. She's very near and dear to my heart. Magneto is very dear to my heart. Cyclops and Storm are. Those are the fan favorites that are my own, and the ones, I mean, Magneto is a pure joy to write, to be quite frankly. He is just so fun to write. Rogue is fun to write, but I would have to say like Magneto is probably the one that I'm like, and Jean, because I get to write the world Darling, like I don't get to write that in other stuff. Like the fact that I get to write Darling as much as I do in this show, and Dear and Scott's, it's just so, I love it. But Magneto and Jean would be my top two. I'm curious what you guys
In
have.
the animated series, we got to do Scott, Jean.
Gene,
Yeah, Gene.
We actually have, when you come to the offices next
Yeah.
week, one of our artists drew on our whiteboards. It's Scott screaming, Jean, and then he's looking at a pair of jeans. So I'll show this to you guys.
Yeah. I one of my favorites was not one of the flashier characters that most of the fans wear for cosplay, and that was Xavier, for two reasons. One, that you had this whole group of people, as showrunner, you got a dozen, 20 different writers that you try to keep kind of writing in the same direction. So I felt a great deal of sympathy and empathy for him. And the other one was Magneto, as Bo said. I loved their bromance. I love the fact that you could have 76 episodes where the lead character and the lead adversary loved each other.
Good.
Yeah.
Larry, what about you?
Well, getting back to the part about the cameos, my favorite cameo was I got a chance to do the very first Black Panther cameo for the series. He was actually called African Mutant number 3, but I got a chance to put him in the show, along with like Deadpool and Doctor Strange and the Watcher. I was able to pepper the series with all of these cameos. And part of it is that when I was a kid, I mean, this is going to show my age. Back in the 60s, I was reading books, Spider-Man books, and then Stan would write Thor in one panel, going through the scene. And Spidey saying, "Hey, watch where you're throwing that thing." But as a kid, it was the first time I had ever seen a world that everything was connected. So fast forward to the X-Men, I tried to do that for the fans, to give them something that I got when I was reading the books and put that into the show. And so I would drop in cameos here and there, but my own personal rule was that I would only put cameos in if it didn't interfere with the original story, so that if you're a fan of Marvel, you saw it, you recognized it, you know what it was. If you didn't know the Marvel mythology, the story would just go straight forward without any problems. But that was my gift back to the fans. I did that for them, so that they could have the same thrill and excitement I had when I was reading the books in the 60s.
Well,
In the
we've all
opening
been thrilled
shot
and
in
excited.
Nightcrawler, just in Nightcrawler alone, in the opening shot, as they pan across the lodge, you got Doctor Strange there, and you have MJ sipping a mug of cocoa in a Spider-Man mug, wearing a Spider-Man sweater, but she's never called out. It's just, if you know what you're looking for, it's like, oh my gosh, that whole
Doctor Strange, there's Clea, there's Mary Jane. But
I think everybody's going to have to go back and rewatch, catch all these cameos. They're yelling in my ear. We got to wrap up. But, Bo, the final episode of the original series, Graduation Day, such a strong ending. How and where do you pick things up with X-Men 97 on Disney Plus? Quick answer, but I gotta know.
Okay. I mean, what I can say is we're going to be picking up about several months after Professor X, left Earth after being shot by Henry Gyrick and had to return to the Shi'ar homeworld to be with Lalandra. And what ended up happening is that assassination attempt has led to this wave of increased sympathy towards mutants and understanding. And things are, despite the Friends of Humanity still having their mullets and getting all kind of up in it, things are really starting to look up for mutants. And this is going to kind of come to a head and leads our X-Men to kind of say, like, what does the future hold for us? We weren't expecting this. And you're going to have, pretty much Cyclops and Storm really wanting to carry on the dream. And they've recruited Morph and Bishop to actually become full-time members of the team, while other X-Men like Jean and the will they, won't they couple, Gambit and Rogue, are starting to begin to question, maybe there is a life we've been fighting for this life of acceptance. Can we just go out there and enjoy it for once, maybe? And then, of course, somebody shows up who shouldn't show up, and it's Magneto, who's also kind of feeling like, Professor X he did a solid for mutant kind. I'm going to try to walk in his footsteps. I'm going to try to be a force of good for mutant kind. But then, of course, as the X-Men are kind of looking at the future and really we're going to be talking a lot about this. How do you face the future? How do the X-Men do what they've been telling humanity to do for decades, which is embrace the future? A very, 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 very favorite character of mine and many other people, Mr. Sinister, will rear his ugly head from the past with pretty much a pretty foolproof plan to destroy the X-Men once and for all.
Oh, I love it. That was delightful. There's going to be a bunch of headlines on the news sites tomorrow. Thank you for that. This has been Uncanny.
Thank
a huge
you.
thank you to Julia Leewald, Eric Leewald, Bo DeMaio, and Larry Houston for joining us. Give a wave to everyone. I am going to definitely be talking to all of you again sometime soon, I'm sure. Now let's head to some more trivia.
Access granted. Access granted. Access granted. Access granted.
Thank you to my friend John, who just texted me in the middle of the stream to say I'm doing great. Thank you, John. Love you. All right, onward we march to a new century and new eras, but same reminders for me. We've got more giveaway items. Put your peepers on these. Ooh la la. We got a pair of really awesome X-Men hardcover books from our friends at Abrams Books. First up is, hey, y'all, I recognize those names. That's right, it's Eric and Julia's spectacular book, X-Men, The Art and Making of the Animated Series. It's got 300 incredible color illustrations, interviews, and tons of behind-the-scenes goodness. I have a copy sitting next to my desk at all times at home. Next up, A Collector's Dream, a hardcover collection of the full-color Jim Lee penciled art from the Uncanny X-Men trading cards. This book features art, interviews, history. It's amazing. It's got a full set of I have a full set of these cards at home, but to see the cards in this size, this quality, super cool. I need to get a copy of that book. But we've got 10 of each of these books, so you know the drill. Stick around until the end of the stream to be eligible to be chosen at random to win one of these wonderful books. Whew. All right, so our next panel is a doozy. We've got two legendary creators we are super excited for you to hear from, but one of these folks wasn't going to be able to make it live with us tonight, and we really, 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 really wanted to be able to talk with them, so we caught up with Grant Morrison and Jonathan Hickman a bit earlier on, and we're now proud to present this truly uncanny conversation. Check it out. Since the turn of the century, the X-Men have evolved over and over again, from blockbuster films, multiple cartoons and games, and some of the biggest and boldest moves in comics with secondary mutations, deaths, returns, cutting-edge looks, and a host of world-shattering events. Which brings us all the way up to the modern Krakoan era, which started with 2019's House of X and Powers of 10, an event that continues to have lasting effects on the X-Men. You know, whether it was Exiles scratching my itch for great what-if stories and deep cut X-Men tales, or New X-Men slaughtering, mutating, and rewiring both mutants and my brain, or witnessing creators tear it up firsthand during my years here at Marvel, it's been a killer 2 decades. And I am so excited to be joined here to talk about these exciting and dynamic eras of X-Men with Grant Morrison, writer of New X-Men, among many incredible works. Hello, Grant.
How you doing? Nice to meet you.
You too. And Jonathan Hickman, writer of House of X, Powers of 10, X-Men, and the man of a million notebooks. Hi, Jonathan.
Hey, bud. How you doing?
Good. All right. Welcome, everybody. Very excited. We'll start with you, Grant.
Sure.
Grant, you come to Marvel and then to the X-Men at the beginning of the 21st century. We've just as Ultimate Universe is taking off, as Marvel Knights is rocking, as many characters and series are getting all kinds of new shines. What was your goal with New X-Men?
Well, I mean, as you say, it was a really, really exciting time. You know, Marvel was kind of in decline, and then suddenly Joe came in, and that whole team came in and brought us all in at that moment. And we were just given carte blanche to actually to revamp this whole thing. And it was so exciting. There was so much energy. And I think everything came out of that energy, really, you know, the sense of the freedom of it. So my goal with X-Men was really to, I guess, first to make it more contemporary, because I thought it deserved to be moved into the 21st century. You know, it was the turn of the millennium. It seemed that we needed a kind of new way to look at these things. And X-Men had been very much a superhero comic for a long, long time. And it was about superhero battles, and the costumes were very much superhero things. But I saw the potential to turn it into more of a science fiction story, because I thought that was the original power of the X-Men. You know, it was kind of the science fiction one in the team. It was the guy with the school, and they all wore school uniforms. They all wore the same thing. They weren't superheroes like Spidey or Thor or those guys. So I think just going back to that original and treating it as what would this be like in the modern day? If they're not superheroes, what are the X-Men? And my idea was that they're rescue and emergency team for the mutants and mutant culture worldwide. And it's not just about fighting battles all the time. It's about helping people and, you know, bringing people from danger into the safety of the school. So it was very much that was the approach, was to how can we update everything, keep it the same, but change everything. You know, suddenly it's not a superhero slugfest comic. It's about science fiction. It's about culture. But it's still the X-Men, you know, it's still Jean and Scott and everyone we know.
Oh, which is great. I remember being in my Greenpoint apartment in Brooklyn and having 114 and on and reading those books and being like, what the hell? I love this, but what the hell? It was great because I, you know, grew up on the X-Men superhero stuff, which is cool. We have that, you know, on. And like Jonathan, you know, what you're doing has been in similar and very different ways. But going backwards, Jonathan, do you remember the first X-Men or even X-related comic you read, and how did that shape your own creative direction as a writer?
I went back and looked because I was trying to figure it out. I remember I was on vacation in 1980 with my family down at the beach, and I went to a 7-Eleven or something like that, and I don't remember what issue it was, but it has to be. It was during the Dark Phoenix saga because it was 80, but it was I don't know, it's got to be 135, 136, something like that, and you know, it was that book at its kind of height, and it was getting ready to go on a run that was pretty unreal. So I think anybody that's my age or around my age, you know, or whatever, that got to kind of eat that Claremont Byrne run when they were at their height. It's to say it's formative, you know, sure, but it was just so cool at the time. It was just so cool that it was super memorable and pretty amazing.
Yeah,
I love that stuff, man. I love that stuff.
What about it? Do you think there's anything specifically about it other than it just being cool? Did anything spark something that, you know, you can sort of pinpoint to where you've come from and where you're going to as a creator, as a writer?
It was really the first Marvel book that I really read and took off for me. This was like my first real dip of buying Marvel books. And then, obviously I started buying a whole bunch of stuff, but it was X-Men for years was my only Marvel book. And so obviously it changed the way that I viewed, how you could make comics and what kind of stories you could tell with these kind of archetypal characters.
Yeah. Grant, so much of X-Men lore is propelled by change, by evolution. Can you tell us what brought not only the secondary mutation ideas into your stories, but also characters such as Cassandra Nova and Quentin Quire, who still resonate and still have big roles to play this day?
Well, I think the secondary mutations was actually a problem-solving thing, because I wanted to use Colossus in the book and I couldn't do it. So I was looking around. I thought, well, if I can't use Colossus, he's off doing something else somewhere else in another book, or else he'd just died recently. I've forgotten the exact status he was in at the time, but we couldn't use him. And I wanted someone with super hard skin. And I thought, what can I do? And then I'm thinking about Emma Frost, and I really loved the character of Emma Frost. And I thought of, well, she's kind of the Ice Queen, she's all white stuff. She wears dresses in white and she's got the white hair. And I think it would be really cool. And the fact that she's kind of an upper class kind of woman, if I tie her into the notion of diamonds and give her diamond skin, then I can have an alternative to Colossus, but with Emma Frost. So it kind of combined the desires to have both of those characters into one character. And that's really all it came out. It was to solve a narrative problem because I couldn't use Colossus. But in the end, I think it added something quite interesting, because then it allowed us to say that, well, there can come a moment almost like a puberty in a mutant's life where suddenly it happens again, something else happens, a new extension of the power might emerge. And I thought that just opened up a whole bunch of story possibilities that were really interesting. And you could use it if you wanted, and you'd use it if you didn't have to use it if you didn't. So it was an interesting way of looking at them, I thought. But purely happened because I couldn't use another character.
I mean, sometimes that's just how it works. I'm sure, Jonathan, you've had similar situations.
Sure, but I don't know that I don't know that I can think of an example that is a more perfect thing for a character that happened out of a plot/narrative solve. Like Emma Frost becoming that was perfect. It was absolutely perfect. So.
Yeah, 100%. Jonathan, House of X, Powers of 10, obviously we talked about it, ushering in the Krakoan age for mutants. I'm sure you've talked about this a bunch, but for our audience here, can you tell us a little bit about how it started? Was it something that was like gestating in your brain for a while? Is it something that jumped out at you maybe as you were working on your other stories? Did you have a conversation with someone at a con, at the bar after a con, be like, oh, this is what we got to do with X-Men? What was it for you?
It really was like I was talking about earlier. I obviously have done a lot of stuff at Marvel. But all the books that I had worked on up until X-Men were things that I didn't read as a kid, and really didn't read as I was, when I was in college and stuff like that. And so this is the first time that I got to do a book at Marvel where I had ideas that had been running around in my head for 20, 30 years. And so it was a really different mechanism. It was easier and faster, and it was like I was cooking with something that was more flammable, and it was I don't know, it was more of an expression of like, even though I did a book like FF, which was based on which is a nostalgia book, of course, right? This was like the first time that I felt like I was writing as a child, like kind of in a lot of ways. So so it was fun, and it was wonderful, and we had a blast. So
yeah, look, where you put Sunspot and Cannonball into it, like, as a reader, I feel your love for those characters, and it's apparent. It's great. It's why we're here. It's why we're talking about this. We're talking about these last 20 years, more or less. And I was thinking about it, there feels like this clear line that runs from the start of the X-Men films into New X-Men by Grant and Frank Quitely and crew, and to the X-Men finding homes then in Utopia and San Francisco, among many other places, and then right to the big moves of Krakoa and Arakko and mutant immortality and everything. And each feels new and fresh, but also inclusive and built upon what's come before. for the two of you, how important is it for your respective stories, your X-Men stories in particular, obviously, to embrace what's come before? And how tricky can continuity be when you're ushering in so many new ideas and characters and possibilities? Grant, you want to?
Well, I think it's essential to build on what went before, especially something like the X-Men, which is or the Marvel universe in itself is pretty coherent. You know, it's not like some of the other comic book universes, which are much wilder and they came from a much more kind of spread out place. But certainly with Marvel, it's super coherent. And I think part of the immersive nature and of the love that people have for the characters is because they have built on it. There's no big retcons, there's not big changes. They do have a history. And I think it's really important for us to recognize that and to work with that and to play with it and to move it on, because then it feels like these people have real lives, you know. And it's a big virtual reality, the X-Men world or the Marvel universe, and you go in there and it's kind of, you know, it works, it holds together, and I think that's super important. So yeah, I mean, I think it's all about looking at those past stories. And you know, when I came in, it was like Scott had just been possessed. And I thought, well, what would that do to someone being possessed by a monstrous supervillain? And usually these things just get kind of glossed over. But it was more, well, what does that do to him? And what actually, how did that change him and crack him open and make him, you know, suddenly start questioning himself? So I only got that from being aware of continuity and making sure that, you know, I was aware of what the characters were and their relationships. That's what X-Men is. It's soap opera as well. It's science fiction soap opera, and it's really important to have all those big dramatic, you know, heightened emotional relationships, I think.
Yeah. Jonathan?
Yeah, I think there's a narrative weight that comes with being able to dance in between the raindrops of continuity. It really is all modern myth making stuff, right? And so when you think about continuity, what you're really talking about are the parts of the stories that resonate to such an extent that they stick around, right? It's actually like, it's the cool stuff that's the glue that people remember over the years. And so I just think the trick is understanding who the characters are and taking them in a new and exciting place, but doing it in a way that evokes you know, the memories of all the stories that you read as a kid and all that kind of stuff, but it just presents it in a new shiny way, right? Your version of telling it around a fire, right? I mean, and so it's if you do it the right way, it's so narratively powerful because it scratches with, especially with the X-Men, because it scratches two itches. It is the nostalgia thing, but it's also shiny and new, right? And so as a franchise, like X-Men is like it gets even more from that experience than a lot of other books too. So you know, that's how I feel about it. So
Grant, I was just looking, it's been a roughly 19 years since your last issue of New X-Men came out. Are there any X characters you miss writing, any wish you'd done something more with, you know, now looking back at it?
Yeah. Well, no, honestly, the one I was going to do something with near the end of the run was Siren, of all characters, you know, Banshee's daughter.
Yeah.
And I'd actually come out with a really good role for her. And I thought she'd make a great addition to the team, this kind of sort of fiery Irish woman, you know, that bringing a bit of the Celtic. But I never got around to doing that one. So that was the kind of only thing I missed. I think I did all the other characters that I really liked from the past. I think even the weird ones like Multiple Man that I thought I might never get to. I managed to put him in a story, you know, and actually have some fun with that. So I kind of did them all, I think.
Great. Jonathan, you know, part of it of X-Men is, you know, mutants are hated. And you know, we've had this for decades of them being hated and feared. And then you and the team give X-Men paradise. You give them eternal life, unlimited possibilities. Yet you torture them so freaking much. It's like things have only gotten worse for mutants. And we, as X-Men fans, we love that pain. We just need it. But why, Jonathan? Why?
Well, I think that's called drama, right? Like I think that's kind of the job, right? And you know, we do what we do.
God bless you both. It's just the pain is beautiful.
Yeah,
all right,
we put them through hell, you know. We
Sure,
have
sure.
To, we have to.
Yeah,
Sure, you got to put him there to bring him out, you know.
Yeah.
So.
exactly. I think,
Show the exits.
Sure.
sometimes fans are like, "Oh, I just want great things," but we got to have the lows to enjoy those highs. But all right, time for some fan questions.
Okay.
This one for both of you, and this one says, "In the end of your run for Grant, Beast is infected by Sublime, turns out to be the ultimate adversary, and then with that version of Hank McCoy, and then you have Dark Beast from Age of Apocalypse, and his current incarnation turning into a more murky character." I wouldn't say murky, I'd say he's a murderer. But anyway, what is it about Beast that makes him such an appealing villain?
Well, for me, it wasn't so much that he was a villain. I always felt he was kind of vulnerable. You know, I think with Hank McCoy, he was presented as this kind of loquacious, you know, happy-go-lucky character, and then he changed and he became a lot darker when Jim Starlin turned him into the furry blue beast, and but then he kind of lightened up again. He became this like happy guy in the Avengers. So basically, I'm looking at this bipolar kid, you know, who's I think he's someone who's really vulnerable, and that's how I saw it. It's not so much that he's a good villain, it's that he falls into bad situations, I think, and that's why it makes it more human. It's like the Beast is not a villain. That Hank McCoy would never be a villain, but he makes choices, or his sense of obligation leads him to make terrible mistakes, and he winds up doing something awful that he wishes he hadn't done. And I think he constantly castigates himself for being that guy, but at the same time, he's into opera, he's funny, he's all of it, but I think he swings wildly. And probably that's why it's when we see him taking that dark turn, I think it hurts more because he's a lovely guy, you know. It's like you don't want that to happen to Hank. And I think he's also just unfortunately saddled with the name The Beast. You know, every time someone's got a kind of 666 story in mind, he's going to be the bad guy. So there's that. But yeah, to me, it's more about his vulnerability than his actual potential for villainy, let's say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's of all the original X-Men, I think he's the sweetest guy, you know, like I think he has the best heart. I just think he's been put into a series of impossible positions and had to make decisions that you know, worse and even more terrible, and it breaks him. Like I think that's kind of what the character is. I mean, I think it's why, regardless of how bad the stuff is that he gets put through, you always kind of innately believe it bothers you so much because you think that he's going to pull out of it, right? You think that he's gonna be able to make a better decision. Like he's gonna, but he's I think he's a lovely character. I'm sure that there will be a turn and an ascendant arc, and then he'll be faced with another impossible situation and make a terrible choice. You know,
I can only hope so. We're running out of time, but I want to grab two more questions. One, this one came in from Kellner for Jonathan. And this one is a little bit of a spoiler. Maybe you just brush it off or whatever, but Kellner asks, was it always the plan to make Moira a villain for the Krakoan era, or did that come as the story developed? Also, how is it that Omega Sentinel changed her perception about mutants and joined Orchis? What really happened to her?
I don't want to answer that because it you know, people are still working on those stories and all that kind of stuff, but I'll just say no, absolutely not. She wasn't going to be like a big villain. So that's a thing that came much later.
Nice.
Happens, you know.
That's the way it goes. All right, last one, and I know, Grant, you've been eager to talk about this one. The question comes in from Justin, and the question is, can Cyclops dance?
Well, I brought my ruby quartz for this one. Cyclops would be like that. And it's like, that would be his dance, and his feet would be really tight, doing these little twisty moves, and it's exactly how he would move, and then he would feel embarrassed and walk off the dance floor.
Yeah,
well, that's my answer.
I love it, Jonathan. What do you think? You think Scott's got the moves?
I defer to the master here.
That is a wonderful way to wrap this up. This has been extraordinary. A huge thank you to Grant Morrison and Jonathan Hickman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now, viewers, we got a little more trivia for you.
Access granted. Access granted.
The show that sparked my X-Men love
Thanks
was
for letting
X-Men
me
the
barge
animated
in,
series
Ryan.
back in the
My name
90s
is
Saturday
Jerry
morning
Duggan.
cartoons with my bowl of cereal watching X-Men. I mean, it was the perfect Saturday morning.
I just love seeing all the badass female characters on the screen, like Jean Grey and Kitty Pryde.
The first X-Men film from 2000 was probably one of the things that I watched hundreds of thousands of times.
My favorite X-Men event definitely was Dark Phoenix Saga.
The X-Men have always been extremely important characters to me. I grew up in a small town. I felt outcast. I felt kind of like a misfit. I really related to these mutants and the trials and tribulations they went through. There was some of the best characters Marvel's ever created in my book.
I wanted to be them so bad as a kid. I still do, but they're just so cool that it was just so awesome to see on the screen, and that's why I fell in love with it.
I first got into X-Men from the movie, and just seeing that as a teenager, all of these kids who were different and who were weird and were freaks, and how they found this place that they could truly belong and be celebrated for their differences. It was a game changer.
We are back live and in person. All right, look, I've been holding on to that Grant and Jonathan interview for a little while now because we had to record that ahead of time, but we are live now, and I'm sure you're all freaking out about how great that was. Imagine me, the one who got to talk to them because they're such sweethearts, and then Grant friggin' dancing as Cyclops. Come on, my job rules. Anyway, we are moments away from our final panel of the evening and that much closer to the big reveal of our giveaway winners. Let's take a look at yet more items that we've got for you in this giveaway. Woo-wee, check these out. Inspired by Uncanny X-Men number 275, Hasbro has created this Marvel Legends 3-pack featuring Banshee, Psylocke, and Gambit. They look so amazing in their classic early 90s X-Men uniforms, and if you have this, you automatically have a figure in Gambit that can be trashed by all your other toys. It's a win-win. And then there's even more. Another Marvel Legends figure 3-pack from our friends at Hasbro. Same costumes and comic book inspiration as the other set, but honestly, one of the best possible trios I could ask for. This time it's Storm, Forge, and Jubilee. God, I love them so much. Check out those accessories. So dope. And loyal viewers, we're so close now. We've got 15 of each of these 3-packs to add to our epic giveaway haul. Stick around until the end of the show to be eligible to win. And if my math is right, that's like 10,000 things we're giving away. My math is way off, that's fine, but it's still gonna be a lot. Don't worry about that. As we dive into our final panel of the night, you have questions and comments, throw them in the Q&A section at the bottom of your Zoom window. Time for our final panel. All right, we're just going right into it. As we round out this event, we've talked about 60 years of X-Men stories, from beginnings by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby to the runaway success of the all-new, all-different Uncanny team and its many offspring. The magic of an X-Men crossover, the bombastic 90s, the power of X-Men in animation, the game-changing 2000s, and the gut-wrenching, devastating utopian paradise of Krakoa. It all goes back to Professor Xavier's dream for peaceful coexistence between mutants and mankind. And more profoundly for us all, the metaphor that there is always hope for greater peace in the world we live in, regardless of race, religion, creed, body, or spirit. We all have a place in the multiverse. Before we wrap it up, let's look ahead at the start of the next 60 years and see what Mighty Marvel has in store for the X-Men in 2023. And joining me to talk about the future of the X-Men, Jordan D. White, X-Men Senior Editor, and Lauren Amaro, X-Men Associate Editor. Welcome you too, and I'm going to ask y'all some questions, but viewers, of course, don't forget, submit your questions for our guests as well. All right, let's start out with a fun one. The first X title you each read. Jordan, what do you got?
My first foray into the X-Men was through a side book. It was through Excalibur. The actual issue, the first issue I got of Excalibur was Excalibur #4. It was a friend of mine got it on Halloween. Someone had given it to them as a Halloween giveaway. And it's the one where it's a janitor on the front cover. Alan Davis drew it, janitor, talking about all the things you're going to see on the inside that's not on the cover. It's classic, amazing. I loved that issue. They fight Arcade. It's so cool. And that was my foray into it. I got huge into Excalibur. And then through that, I followed the Excalibur characters back into X-Men. And to this day, the X-Men that were members of Excalibur are absolutely my favorite. Kate Pryde, Nightcrawler, Megan, Rachel, Captain Britain. They are absolutely my favorites. Because that series rules. But it opened me up to this whole world that I got to enjoy.
There's no way to not become a fan after that. The chat is lots of love for Excalibur. Someone says Excalibur, underrated team. So all that. Lauren, was it Excalibur for you? What was it? Something else?
So it wasn't Excalibur, but like Jordan, it was definitely one of the sort of, I'm going to say like offshoot books. My first X-Men read was Spider-Man and the X-Men. Which, if folks aren't familiar, it is Spider-Man going into, I believe it was the Dream Grade School at that point in time, and teaching a class on ethics to a bunch of sort of trouble students at the academy, while also trying to ferret out a potential traitor on Wolverine's request. And it's just such a fun school adventure book with a bunch of really weird kids who have just like sort of the weirdest matchup of powers. There's Shark Girl, whose powers that she turns into a shark. You have No Girl, you have Glob. Like, there's just so many fun characters in that, and they get up into just some really crazy antics with Spider-Man there to lead the way. And like Jordan, it was sort of one of those cases where I really fell in love with the characters in that story, and then wanted to find out more about them, trace them back into other books. And I think, as is the case with a lot of X fans, you read one book, you find a new character who captures your attention, you go down the rabbit hole, try and find out more about them, and find more people to love. I think that's one of the best things about the X-Men, is that there's just so many cool people in our corner of the universe.
Hell yeah. Someone in chat says, quote, I love turning people into dinosaurs, which is what, a Sauron quote? Or is that Stegron? It gets sort of flipped around in my head, but nonetheless.
I think that's Sauron. Oh gosh.
I think it's Sauron.
Look, we only work here. It's fine. No big deal, but it's still great stuff and great comic. All right. Of course, I know it's later this year, but we've been talking about it for a while. The Fall of X. How dare you? Also, what is the Fall of X? Jordan, can you tell us?
Fall of X is going to be the next stage of our Krakoan X-Men story, and as the name implies, it's going to be a rough one for mutants. They've been, I mean, it's not like everything has been perfect since the founding of Krakoa, but things have been relatively good for mutant kind. There's been a bunch of things that they've had to put up with, but they still had their own nation and whatnot, you know, and things are going well. Are those things going to continue in Fall of X? Let me just say it's going to be dark, like I said, and they're going to go through some troubles. It's going to be a status quo that affects the entire X-Men line. Any book that has mutants in it, it's going to be affected by this for sure.
Lauren, of the books that we can talk about, what can you say of your titles for Fall of X, or even what titles you have that will be going into Fall of X?
I don't know if I can say anything about them.
Look, I tried, chat. I tried.
I can concur with Jordan that it's really an exciting new era that promises to really test what's been built in Krakoa since the days of House and Powers. And I'm really excited for us to get into it, because some of the dominoes that are being set up have been sort of set up for a while now. And I think fans are really going to enjoy to see some of that payoff, and just really how long the writers in the room have been thinking about this.
Yeah. Speaking of dominoes, let's talk about some of the stuff leading into Fall of X. We've got four Sinisters getting into some trouble. How much more chaos can they wreak, Jordan?
Oh man. Well, so I think we're only halfway through Sins of Sinister as we do this live stream, and so there's a lot of chaos to come from that and the fallout from that, because I guarantee you there will be some serious fallout from Sins of Sinister as well. But then now we know all four of these Sinisters, each of them has their own approach for their goal and their own way of going about things. We got one who is the classic Sinister we know, one who's much more interested in humans and post-humans, one who's more interested in magic, and one who's more interested in the cosmic things. And that's a lot of different things that can spread complete chaos for mutant kind. And they're gonna a lot.
I like that.
Four suits of
Also,
it.
we've been teasing the return of Apocalypse. That is that good? Is that bad? Do we want to say anything? I don't know.
That's a great
love
question.
Apocalypse.
That's a great question. Is it good or bad? Obviously, Apocalypse for many years was just a horrific villain that the X-Men never were friends with ever. And when he came through that gate onto Krakoa and shook hands with Professor Xavier, that was one of the most shocking moments of House of X. So yeah, him being on side with the rest of mutant kind was really shocking and surprising and a fun thing to work on because it was so different for him. He went away at the end of Ten of Swords with his wife and his family to go back to this war-torn world of Amenth. What does him coming back mean? Is he going to come back and be like, great news, everybody, I'm back to do good things? Is he going to come back with a terrible agenda that will make everything awful? I can't tell you. Those are two strong possibilities. X-Men Red is the place to look for that story unfolding, and of course the Fall of X one shot, the Heralds of Apocalypse, which we've already announced, is another one. It's going to be really, really cool.
Sure.
Also, we should be saying his proper name, but it's hard to pronounce. It's very hard to pronounce on a live stream. So saying Apocalypse, I think it's okay. We can get away with it.
Have you figured out the pronunciation for it? Is there a pronunciation? Or you just
only mutants can say that.
It's a live stream. I'm trying very hard not to swear, Jordan B. White. I'll tell you that much. Lauren, I was thinking about Apocalypse in a suit in that one issue by Jonathan and Laniel, I believe. Do you like Apocalypse in a suit, or do you like him all flashy, cool costume?
I mean, look, a good suit is just aces. It's amazing. And I'd love to see like the X-Men sort of, one of the fun things about this era is they've sort of traded costumes and gone to wear a lot of fun looks from the past, but also a lot of fun new looks. And I'm excited to see folks get dressed up for this year's big event.
Yes, which is a perfect segue. Thank you, Lauren, to talk about the Hellfire Gala. Jordan, can you tell us, first, tell us what the Hellfire Gala is in case any of our viewers aren't caught up, haven't been reading. I know we've got people from every era and every fandom here. So how it came together, what it is, and what we can expect from this year's gala.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, everybody's seeing Phil Noto's cover for this year's Hellfire Gala one shot as we speak, so they're getting their first look at some of the looks that are going to be worn there. But the Hellfire Gala was an idea that also came right after Ten of Swords, which means Apocalypse never got to go to one, which is a bummer. But Jerry Duggan came up with it. He was like, let's do a gala that the Hellfire Club throws, and it'll be crazy and big things can happen. And so far, we've done one every actual real life calendar year. How that works with Marvel time, let's not talk about. I could spend way too much time talking about that. But we've done one every actual calendar year, and every year something really big has happened. The first year is when mutants surprised all of mankind by terraforming Mars in the moment and claiming it for mutant kind, which was a huge thing, obviously. At the second one, they were just kind of doing a little bit of a show-off one, but that is also, it coincided with the world finding out that mutants have the power of resurrection and that no mutants die anymore. So that ended up being kind of not 100% great for them, but overall, okay, still, they got some news out there about how great they are. They've got their plans for this year. But this year also is the issue that kicks off Fall of X. So I'll definitely tell you things don't go the way they planned. How bad that is, you will have to buy the book to see. But let me tell you, this is a book you're going to absolutely want to buy. It is jam-packed with the best artists. We've got working on it right now. We've got Chris Anka, Josh Cassara, Russell Dodderman, Adam Kubert, Pepe Larraz, RB Silva, Luciano Vecchio, and more. It is going to be a killer lineup. You saw a couple of the designs there on that cover that Phil Noto did for us. We got designs being designed by all sorts of different artists, including a number of the ones we just said, and they look gorgeous. We've seen some that you haven't seen yet. You will be blown away. They are so cool looking. Lauren, please talk about this, Lauren, because you worked really hard on these designs with these artists.
Yes, honestly, the Hellfire Gala is one of my favorite events in the year. It is such a big moving piece, but getting to reach out to artists and have folks design their look, it's been more fun every single year as folks start to understand what the gala is more. So I feel like almost everyone we reached out to really jumped at the chance, was so excited. And, before we could even get too far into the explanation, people were already like, I have ideas, I have designs, and every single one that's come in, I've just gotten more and more excited about. I absolutely cannot wait for you guys to see the variant covers. It's taking everything in me not to just shout and share them. I have to be patient and wait, but I'm so excited for folks to get their hands on it.
Which I was going to say they don't have to wait long for, but it's coming out Wednesday, July 26th. So that's a little ways away, and that's fine. Also, the two of you, I'm going to be slacking you tomorrow. I want all those covers, all those designs. Don't keep them away from me. Look, all right, we got to move on because some of the greatest expressions of our collective fandom as X-Men fans can be seen in all the amazing cosplayers, the costumers, and the most amazing X-Men costumes, as we've been talking about, have been seen during the annual Hellfire Gala comics. So check this out. We are thrilled to announce that D23, the official Disney fan club, will be hosting the first ever real life Hellfire Gala during this year's San Diego Comic-Con in July. Get your gowns, crowns, and capes ready, and stay tuned for more details coming soon at d23.com/Hellfire Gala. Lauren, I remember we were talking about this ahead of time. You were just like, that's so cool. It's amazing.
Oh, I lost my mind when I first heard about it. Jordan, I may be sick that week.
Of course, understandable. I'll tell you, I am. It is so cool. It is mind blowing. I am mortified at the prospect of possibly going because I don't dress well. I am going to be a fashion disaster. So I'm like, what? How could that possibly happen?
We just got to get Jumbo Carnation to make you something real cool. It'll be
exactly.
fine.
He could pull it off. He could pull it off.
This is going to be weird because I think this is going to be the year where the entire X office and all the X creators go to San Diego. No X books come out in like 2 or 3 months afterwards. Oops. We'll see how that goes. All right. Let's keep this rolling. Lauren, tell us a little bit about some of the threats ahead in this year for mutants in your titles. What can you tell us that they'll be facing?
Well, let's see. I try and say it without trying to give anything away. I think folks will see in the upcoming catalog that comes out. But I say that it is going to be an old villain coming back in a new way, and that we're really excited to have them be showcased and to show them in a new environment, along with a team that is just, I think, one of the funnest matchups in terms of who ends up on it, some of which actively do not get along with each other, but they're going to find themselves in a situation where they're going to have to band together if they want to survive. I'm going to leave it at that to not give any spoilers away, but and Jordan, I'm sure you can talk about how
Jordan, give me another non-answer. Come on.
Okay, you want a real answer? I mean, I can definitely tell you the thing that you already know, which is Orcus is a continuing threat to mutant kind, and it is going to be an even bigger one coming up. They have some different pieces to them. They have Nimrod, they have Omega Sentinel, they have Fei Long, they have Dr. Stasis, they have MODOK is working with them at this point. And it only grows from there. Judas Traveler, which is a really deep cut. If anybody out there is a Judas Traveler fan, please sound off. He's a member. He's a member. We've already shown that. Yeah, I know. Very surprising. But they will only grow more powerful as we go on the rest of the year.
Fair. All right, let's flip that around a little bit then. So, any mutants you want fans to keep an eye on for this year? Jordan, we'll start with you.
Okay. All right. Well, it's of course I'm going to say this because I led off by saying how much I love Excalibur, but Kate Pryde definitely has a really big story coming up this year that is, which is good news if you love Kate Pryde, but it also might be bad news if you love Kate Pryde because, like I said, Fall of X is going to be pretty dark and devastating. So take that with a grain of salt. Iceman has some great stuff coming up. Who else? Sunspot always, because he rules and he's always got a plan. So he's got some great stuff coming up. Lauren, I'm sure you got somebody you can call out, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think really anyone who's currently on this iteration of the X-Men is someone you're going to want to keep an eye on to see where they end up in Fall of X. But specifically for me, I'm really excited by what's going to be coming down the line for Firestar and Magic. I think they're both great characters, and I'm excited to see them really take the stage.
Ooh, I like that. All right, Jordan, you're a senior editor here at Marvel Comics. You got some power. You got friggin' Judas Traveler in your books. Where is Sugar Man? Give me Sugar Man.
Who's your favorite X character, not including Sugar Man?
Cable probably, or Wolverine. I'm a simple man.
You know what? I'll say Cable. Let's say Cable. I'll tell you what. You want to trade? I'll get rid of Cable entirely, and I'll go. Okay, now Sugar Man's back. You'll do that deal? All right,
I'll do that right now.
Attack Ryan because he's trying to.
I'll take it. Come at me. I love it. All right.
Don't think I don't see Sugar Man behind you. Don't think I don't see him back there. I see him.
Yeah. This is mine from my office. I brought him here to give us all the good vibes we needed for a successful live stream. And it's been great. I'll tell you that much because of Sugar Man. All right. Got to get to some of the chat stuff in here. JJ asks, if you two could write yourself into the or see yourselves in the X-Men universe, what would be your mutant origin story and powers? Lauren, have you given that any thought?
Oh, I've never given that any thought. But you know what? I'm gonna have to say, I think Madrox is super fun. I like the ability to just like always be able to pop another person to help with whatever you're doing. Teamwork is always a great skill. I'm a triplet, so I'm a little bit biased there as well. Always being able to have like another person around. So yeah, I'm gonna say that. As for origin,
that'll help with the special effects.
I think. Oh yes, of course. Trip, and I find out one day by accident. A pretty simple origin.
I like that. Jordan, what about you?
You want the dorkiest answer possible? The dorkiest answer possible is yes. I've thought about this a lot back when I was a teenage Excalibur fan and thinking of ways that I could become a part of the Marvel universe and ask Kitty Pryde on a date. Back then, the powers that I wanted to have. Okay, this is going to sound bad because I just made the Kitty Pryde date joke. It was emotional influence. I wasn't going to use it on Kitty, I promise. And at the time, I was not familiar with the Hellions character, Empath, so I didn't know how dark that power could go. But I wanted to have that power, and I was gonna my superhero name at the time was going to be Hype, because it was very 90s at the time.
You have a costume.
That's a really dark
Jordan?
answer. It doesn't look good, but I did. Yeah, I drew it. I drew a little fake X-Men 90s Jim Lee card. I didn't have Jim Lee drew it. I drew it. It was terrible, but yeah, I did.
I'm gonna ask you to Slack that to me tomorrow.
Yeah, we're gonna need that circulated on the Marvel Culture Slack. Thank you very much. Here's a really interesting question, a great one from Mark M. Mark asks, "What's the biggest factor you think about when finding a writer-artist collaboration?"
Oh wow, that is honestly that's the most important part of our job, and in some ways the hardest. but it's the one that's most satisfying when we do it. Most of the time, I mean, it starts with thinking of a writer whose work that we enjoy and like who has done work that we're like, okay, I think that would fit the kind of project we're looking to make. Once I get in touch with them, I want, as much as humanly possible, which is usually a lot, to give it over to being their story entirely and what kind of story they're interested in telling. And so then through talks with them, I'll find out what kind of a tone they're going to strike in the story. And then we work with our talent management department, Ricky Purdon, who does a great job for us, to figure out artists who we can bring in to draw it and who will fit that tone and fit that idea. And at that point, Tom Brevoort, executive editor at Marvel, always likes to say it's not a science, it's alchemy. You're trying to take these two things and throw them together and get something way bigger and more magical than you could possibly expect. And when it works, it is that kind of thrilling magic.
Yeah, I
Said,
think that's
Lauren, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think a big part of editorial is putting together a project and having a clear idea of what tone you're trying to hit, and then trying to, build sort of in your brain a Rolodex of who does that sort of thing well. Like Jordan is saying, pairing people up can always go, you can never quite account for personalities as much as you want to, but when you're able to find that mix of people who click, who understand sort of what the story is, what they want to build it to be, when they're able to take that ownership and do the thing that they love to do, and get to feed off one another, that often pushes like the creative team to new heights. And it's always so exciting to see, especially in the early days of putting a book together, to see that come together. And hopefully by the end of whether it's a limited series or an ongoing arc, seeing those creative team members sort of leave with a really strong relationship with one another. And to see them go off and do other collaborations together, I think is always fun, because it's proof that you guys picked well or cast well.
Very cool. All right, y'all. I for one happen to be a big fan of revealing secrets, and I have a feeling our Marvel Unlimited subscribers might be as well. So if it's cool with the two of you, I think it's time to fastball special some announcements into the stream. Lauren, talk to me about X-Men Unlimited. What's coming up next?
Yeah, so hopefully everyone on this panel is reading X-Men Unlimited and checking out the awesome line of Infinity comics that are available. But for anyone who picked up last year's Pride issue, you may already be familiar with a team of young transmutants introduced by Grace Freud alongside Scott Henderson. So this is sort of Grace's triumphant return back into the X-Men universe, as she picks up that team alongside amazing artist Alberto Albuquerque, colors CN Nitro, and our letterer VC's Joe Sabino. They're picking that team back up again, this time with Jubilee as their unwitting mentor. After Mojo kidnaps the group to star in his latest TV show endeavor, fighting for their lives and the audience's entertainment, Jubilee is going to have to shape up this ragtag team into a real cohesive superhero unit. And she's going to have to do it fast if they have any hope of surviving this experience and making it back.
Love it. That sounds awesome. Thank you for that. Now, also wanted to share some breaking news, as in this is happening right now at this very second. MU subscribers releasing this very moment is the newest installment of Marvel's Voices. It's issue number 44, and it's focused on Negasonic Teenage Warhead. It's exclusively available on MU, dropped just for y'all right now during the stream. So we're taking a look at this. You can see the cover right there. It looks awesome. This is a brand new arc featuring Negasonic Teenage Warhead in her first ever solo story. Looking so cool. Jordan, can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you know Negasonic, in the comics, one of her big powers is I just forgot what it's called. Like when you can see the future. Yes, that's what they call it. Anyway, point is clairvoyance. There you go. She can see the future, and she gets a vision of the world ending, and then she gets another vision that if she is kissing this specific girl a certain amount of time in the future, then the world won't be ending. But she has no idea who that is. And she has no idea how to get there. And now she's got to make that happen in order to save the universe.
Very, very cool. Also, there's going to be a little Deadpool in there. I wish you liked Deadpool, Jordan. I know you hate the character, but let's move on. Zaz Vid, Spilling Secrets is my absolute favorite. And while we're at it, I might as well share this really cool thing that hold on a second. They're telling me I can't reveal that right now, but we actually have one more special guest who has some news to drop. So fine, bring in that bearded beauty.
Thanks for letting me barge in, Ryan. My name is Jerry Duggan. It's my privilege to be writing X-Men this year, and I bring you great news. On Saturday, May 6th, 2023, on Free Comic Book Day, we have a brand new story in a brand new free comic about a brand new series of Uncanny Avengers. Everything that we've been working towards in our third act is coming to a head this summer. The first story in the book is the return of Uncanny Avengers. It is a flash forward to the events of the Hellfire Gala. The second chapter of this book is an X-Men story from myself and Joshua Cassara. And there's a third secret element of the book, which I am not allowed to even know exists. The last character we saw wearing the Captain Krakoa battlesuit was Cyclops. We have someone new wearing the suit with their own agenda. And in August, you'll be able to read Uncanny Avengers #1 from yours truly, Javier Garron, Maury Hollowell, Tom Brevoort. We're going to be telling stories with Captain America, Rogue, Quicksilver, Psylocke, Penance, and Deadpool. The Uncanny Avengers have existed to provide an example of unity between humanity and mutantdom, and they will need to work extra hard at that now as relationships and friendships have frayed in the events of Fall of X. I can't wait to find out what you all think of Uncanny Avengers. See you out there.
Love you, Jerry. Enjoy your vacation. Thank you all for that. It's going to be so sick. And I see the chat is blowing up about it as well. So much great stuff here. Huge thank you to Jordan D. White and Lauren Amaro for joining us. And wave to everybody. Hit me up with all that stuff I wanted on Slack. See yas. Whew, what a night. A huge thank you to all of our very special guests who joined us tonight. Some truly wonderful stories. One more time, let's show that Marvel Insider code on screen so you can all go and claim your 30,000 points. 30,000. Once you've gotten your points, be sure to check out some of the awesome rewards you can redeem, like a digital wallpaper featuring art from Sins of Sinister #1, or save up those points for the ability to create a Marvel reading list to share your favorite X-Men or other comics with your fellow Marvel fans. Be sure to check Marvel Insider regularly for new ways to earn points and new rewards. It's all very, very cool. And as promised, for those of you true believers who have stuck around with us until the very end, we are currently in the process of selecting winners for all of our incredible giveaway items. There's just too many dang names to get through here, so our Marvel Unlimited team is going to be emailing each winner individually about how to collect their items. So check your email inboxes, please. And a huge congrats to all of you winners out there. And hey, look, if you didn't end up winning one of these items tonight, don't worry. Head on over to marvel.com/X-Men products for a full list of all this cool stuff and where you can pick it up for yourself. And for details on every X-Men and Marvel comic released every single week, subscribe to Marvel's Pull List, which is the official Marvel Comics podcast, co-hosted by me with new episodes every Tuesday. And of course, continue to follow along on Marvel.com and on all of Marvel's social channels all year long as we continue to celebrate the X-Men's 60th anniversary. And of course, we want to hear from you. Share your favorite X-Men memory on social media using the hashtag X-Men60. Thank you all for joining us tonight. I'm Ryan. This is Marvel, your universe. And remember, Gambit's a creep. Bye.